Um, well, welcome everybody for joining us in this February edition of our developer call. As usual, we're going to start with announcements and then go through agenda items, and then we'll talk about what else is on everybody's mind. So looking at the agenda or looking at the announcements, I'm going to pass it over to Kate.
Sure, thanks, Cedric. So for announcements, we have into our development Helm chart support for Kubernetes jobs as brokers. So you can now automate the deployment of jobs or terminating pods to use devices discovered by Ocry. So that is one of the things, I guess, later on the agenda that we're going to talk about is maybe doing a bug bash of sorts to get that ready and confirmed that can move into our production Helm chart or our main Helm chart. And we also can demo some of that work today.
Yeah, super exciting. So going through the agenda list, the first item is demoing the deploying of jobs to discover devices with Akri.
Yeah, awesome. So I can go ahead and show some of that work. Right now, when you install Ocry, usually, say we were to go to, I guess I can share my screen, 1 second. Okay, I'm gonna share my screen. So just to kind of talk about what's different about using Ocry with jobs than it was before. Currently, when you install Ocry, if we go to getting started in our documentation, you get our Helm chart and you can choose either our main Helm chart, which is /Ocry, or our development Helm chart, which is /Ocry/dev or -dev. And then when you go and create an Ocry installation, you set what discovery handlers you want to deploy, and you can also set what configurations you want to create. And then when you're creating configuration, which is what you specify, where you specify what you want to discover and what you want to deploy to what you've discovered, you can also specify a broker image. And that's the image for the workload that will automatically be deployed to discovered devices. So currently in its main chart, Ocry has support only for broker pods. So brokers that are of type non-terminating pods. And this is useful for scenarios where you may want to continuously have a broker using that device. So maybe this is a protocol translation gateway where it's connecting with a USB camera and advertising it as an IP camera. Or maybe it's something that's continuously working with that device, like periodically grabbing the temperature of a thermometer. What this current work that's just merged can do is it supports broker jobs. So all in your installation that changes is you specify broker job here. And what that's telling Ocry is, hey, when you discover a device, deploy this job or deploy a job with this image. And you can also change all of the job fields that are normally in Kubernetes jobs. So if you just go to Kubernetes documentation on jobs such as completions, replicas, parallelism, you can change all of that because it's just a full-fledged job spec that's in our configuration. And Ocry will deploy that job for each discovered device. So this helps enable scenarios where you want to take some action upon a device and then you want that workload to go away. So maybe this is some management scenarios, maybe it's kind of checking the status of a device. And one of them that I'm in a demo right now is a firmware upgrade. So maybe you want a job to be deployed to a device, perform an upgrade, and then go away. So go ahead and get that set up. So for this demo, what I have set up is a mock IP camera. Can you all see my screen? I just want to make sure I was sharing the window. Cool. So I have a mock IP camera that this is the work that I've done on this is open source, and I can share kind of where people can replicate this. But what it basically does is it runs an OnVIF server and then also a WS discovery service so that it can be discovered on the network. So it not only supports the full OnVIF spec, but it also is discoverable. And what it does is it'll run that camera on the specific network interface of your device. And you can also choose what type of fake stream you want to go through it. So I have like a fake purple stream that's going through it. And these are multiple components that I can run together. And then on the back end to mock and upgrade. So when you think about a firmware upgrade for OnVIF, they have this handle that's do firmware upgrade is the handle. And so to simulate that, I modified the OnVIF server to call this upgrade service on the back end that will essentially stop the camera, simulate a timeout during upgrade, in this case 30 seconds, and then restart the camera with a higher firmware version. Any questions on what this mock system is? Cool. Great. So then I'm just going to run this, and you'll see that the camera will come on the network. Here in this top window, this is just the OnVIF device manager. It's supported by the OnVIF community, and it'll just discover your camera and kind of show it for you. But this is a good way to see that we have this camera on the network. It has a stream coming out of it. So now we know that this is a real camera, or this is a really fake camera that we can now discover and upgrade with Ocry. Cool. So let's first make sure that we have nothing running on our cluster. So yeah, it's all clean. And the first thing you want to do when installing Ocry is grab its Helm chart. So just making sure that I have that here. If you've had it for a while, it's always good to do a Helm repo upgrade to make sure you've pulled in the latest stuff. Oh, oops. Sorry, that's Helm. Oops. Let me bring this up a little. It's Helm repo update. And that'll make sure you have the latest stuff, namely jobs. And then you want to set what Kubernetes distro you're using. And this enables us to know what socket your container runtime is using, so the path of it. And if it's not using the default of like one of our distro options, then you can explicitly set that. And our documentation points that out for like setting up your cluster, that part of our documentation. So I'm just going to set that. And then you want to set the path of your kube config. As you can see with both of these, I'm using K3S. And specifically, I have a 2-node cluster. And then you're ready to install Ocry. So let's look at our installation command. So here we're installing the dev chart because that's where jobs is in support right now. And we're passing in what we set for our container runtime socket information. We're saying that we want to enable discovery of OnVIF devices. So that's going to deploy our OnVIF discovery handler. We're saying that we want to create a configuration that uses this OnVIF discovery handler. And we're saying that for each discovered device, I want a broker that is a job deployed. And I want it to use this image, which is an upgrade broker that I've created for this demo. What it does is it calls that handle on the OnVIF camera, that do firmware upgrade handle, and it'll call that. So if we go ahead and install this, we kind of watch, we'll see that we have our OnVIF discovery handler and our agents deployed, and you can see that we just discovered this one camera and we have a job pending, and now it's being created, deployed to it, and it just completed. And so if we refresh this, we'll see that our camera is actually, it's not quite right. Sometimes if I don't run the upgrade service, 1 second, let's do this real quick. because my upgrade service requires root permissions, sometimes if I need to rerun it to make sure it has the appropriate permissions. So we're just going to quickly redo that, mocking the camera. And redeploy, which will be, and now let's watch again and refresh this. Okay, so we're back at the state we were where we just discovered this instance. Sorry, we still have some terminating things here. And our upgrade job is pending once again. And now it is running and completed. Don't know why this is not working. Let's see if this will come back in 30 seconds, just because that's what the upgrade service is supposed to do. So it looks like it didn't get a call on the back end, something with the broker. Okay, well, let's try one more time and see if we can get this to work. If not, we at least showed how jobs can be deployed. Oof, a lot of terminating stuff. Okay, so this is not working. I obviously need to fix my upgrade service. But I think the one thing to point out here is that we have, it'd be nice if I had a camera that supported the up. So the reason we're mocking this is I don't have a camera that supports the upgrade system firmware handle. Most of them you have to use a user interface for OnVIF to upgrade it. But say I had one like that, we could perform this with a real camera, hopefully, and see how it would work out. Looking at what we saw there, let's just go ahead and run it one more time just so we can see kind of that job deploy, even though it didn't do what we expected. Just kind of focus on what that deploy scenario looks like. So let's first make sure everything's cleaned up and then install. So if the thing to focus on, oh, this looks bad. There we go. Focus on here is that even though we have 2 nodes, when we discover this instance, we're just deploying one job to it. I think in the past when we've used, when we did our kind of broker style up, okay, actually it's working this time. So you can see that the camera went offline. It's doing that upgrade. And so you can't even see it at all. It's effectively performing an upgrade. And one thing I didn't really point out is that it was at firmware version 1.0 and the OnVIF device manager. And so this offline period is kind of simulating an upgrade. And after 30 seconds, we can expect that the camera will come back and be at firmware version 2.0, having done an upgrade, and which is where we're at now, and it's back online. And the video is streaming through it. So there's the firmware upgrade. It took a few times to get the backend updater working. Obviously needs to work out some kinks with that. But once again, what I was mentioning was that even though both nodes can see it, only one job was deployed, which is unique to jobs and different to our previous strategy. And that's because you don't need multiple nodes acting upon a job or acting upon a device in this scenario, in a lot of job scenarios. But say you wanted to change that, you can modify the job spec. So you can increase parallelism, and number of completion, so that maybe you wanted both nodes working with it. Are there any questions with this?
So for something like a firmware upgrade, then it does require the device to have some sort of update mechanism, right? Like in terms of OnViv itself has an upgrade handle. Like if I was using something else like a USB device, then it would require the device itself to have some sort of update mechanism, right?
Yeah, exactly. So that's a key point about Ocry, is that it doesn't run on the actual device. It just interfaces with whatever communication and interface that that device has. And so in this case, yes, OnViv has an upgrade handle. And for UDEV devices, I'm not sure what's out there for that. And everyone would be unique in that case, I would expect. And then for OPC UA, which is another protocol that Ocry supports, I believe it has some sort of upgrade handle, but I haven't looked at that. But yeah, that's a good point.
Let's see. And so I guess this demo itself kind of showed an update process, but can this jobs idea be extended to other things? Like if like OnViv had other handlers for maybe not firmware, but like moving the camera around, would it be feasible to use this kind of this idea to access other features?
Yeah, and so that actually is supported by OnViv. You can, it has handles that are like rotate left, rotate right. Once again, the camera needs to support that, but yes, so any kind of, and I guess I would bucket that into management. You could also have a broker that would basically call out to that and do that, and modify the device that way.
That's awesome.
Yeah, super cool. Any other questions with jobs in general? And I think one thing that's cool about it is we can only think of so many scenarios that people could use, but I'm sure there are many more. And what it enables is doing some kind of action upon a device and then being done with doing that. And there's a lot of things that fit into that.
I think this is super exciting, given that like now there's a way to kind of enable that bi-directional communication too, right? It's not just pulling stuff out of devices, but now there's some sort of interaction with the devices too.
Yeah, in the sense of the device. Well, will you explain that a little bit more?
Or I guess now they're like if the devices themselves have a way where you can interact with them, like it's accessible now in an easy way with jobs, right? Sort of like a firmware upgrade or moving a camera. Now it's just something that's kind of built into Ocry and can just be easily implemented.
Yeah, it definitely is more of a, it uses more of what a device has to offer. Essentially, you can probably use more of those parts of a device's interface because we fit more of those scenarios.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. I think that is all I have for the demo of jobs. I think next is kind of the goes along with this. So we want to kind of look at we want to kind of do a bug bash to try out all these scenarios. And what is a part of this implementation is essentially a whole job spec is being passed to Ocry. And so it'd be nice to touch all the various parts of that, see what bugs we have coming up and see what's a bug versus what is a something that we need to document because it's expected, but a little strange, or things along that vein. And so one thing that I was hoping we could discuss is what would a bug bash look like in a community sense, something that we could put out there and people could work on and kind of give feedback. And then we can kind of use that to vet whether this is ready to be merged, or even if it is ready, just get feedback in general on like what may be next, or what is more important to document, or scenarios that are important to build demos around than others.
So how about we start that discussion on the Slack channel? Maybe start listing scenarios where jobs will be useful, and maybe look forward to people contributing to the scenarios. And that's once we get a bunch of scenarios, then we can schedule a bug bash. Just one idea.
And would we frame those scenarios as try to make 3 parallel jobs happen, even though completions with a higher completion number, like something very specific to job specs? Or would those scenarios be like, will jobs work with these devices in these ways?
Yeah, I was thinking that along the lines of, hey, we now have jobs. What scenarios are on top of your head that, like mine, that Akri can address now? And then maybe see specifically, like I'm looking for like UP, like the other protocols. I know we had a couple of contributors looking into what's the protocols names? I kind of got lost. What you
Like the ones that have been in PR, like co-op and zero comp?
Yeah, like I'm really curious, like for those ones, do they see jobs playing a role in those for those protocols, and how would that look like? And maybe that would be like a way also to kind of expand how we're looking into jobs, and then maybe come up with those scenarios that we want to have for bug bash.
Yeah, that makes sense. We need to, I guess we need to phrase that as like, we have jobs in our development chart. And then I think it would also be nice to kind of have those scenarios that are no extra variables, like no extra devices. They're just using our debug echo, but tweaking things a lot to see how it responds. Could always be useful as well. But maybe those are just givens, and then we don't need to necessarily reach out about that.
Yeah, actually, Kate, you mentioned a good point. Like right now, if somebody want to try out jobs, like for some scenario using our debug echo, do we like have like a scenario in mind? Like, do we want to have something that people can try jobs and see it working end to end using our debug echo?
So for debug echo, I haven't merged the documentation on jobs because I'm trying to figure out if that makes sense to have documentation only specific to Ocry dev. But for example, here, let me share my screen.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to say is right now, like your scenario where we have like the upgrade, you have to set up like an IP camera, like the mock IP camera, and you have to set up your upgrade service. So I'm trying to see if there is like a faster way for people to try out jobs where they can maybe implement a counter in like the debug echo version or something. That's kind of simpler.
Totally. I think one that I could imagine for that is so BusyBox, it would be like the equivalent, or yeah. So I guess I'm curious if this kind of, I'm loading like one way I see doing this quickly would be, first of all, using cataconda.com to like quickly create a Kubernetes playground. We could say just go there, and then you can kind of quickly test out jobs by just grabbing the Helm chart and installing jobs and setting that broker image to BusyBox, which will terminate. And you could add like more things, like having a command passed into the, or setting a command in the broker that would like just echo hello world or something, or echo the name of the device that it's connecting to, the fake one, and then just run that quickly on Cataconda and kind of see that come up. I'm not sure if that would be interesting or not. But that could be interesting. Looks like this is taking a little bit to load. Oh, yeah, the problem with this is the devices are on the control plane, which I don't know if the agents are running on this control plane, but I think using something like the Kubernetes playground could be a good way to like kind of quick start folks. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that's a great idea too. Yeah.
But I think, yeah, pointing people to this is like a good start for some things, and we need to, but it might be nice to, maybe that gives more emphasis for merging this documentation, even though it's, I think it is in sync in the sense that it does point to Ocry dev when it's using jobs. And then we could point people to this documentation and they could use the Kubernetes playground to play around with it. But and then that also brings up a question of, is debug echo a good kind of default test discovery handler? I don't know if maybe we need a different kind of bare bones default, or does it make sense to people? Because I know it's a little strange to kind of, they're fake devices locally that we just give arbitrary names to, but I guess that's the whole point of it, is it's supposed to be kind of quick and very declarative.
Yeah, I think it makes sense for me. I think it seems like this is what devs would be familiar with when they're like playing around with Akri or want to test their stuff. So I think for me, yeah, I think it's fine to keep it consistent.
You're on mute, Kate.
Thanks. And going back to it, the Kata containers is a little slow, but it did complete. So that's kind of nice. It kind of shows how you had a job deployed to each of the two debug echo devices. And that what took 3 minutes like to run through that. So I feel like that's a good start for it. Are there, so we mentioned for objectives of a bug bash for jobs being, okay, let's get some ideas on what scenarios people could think could be useful for various protocols. Let's also find a way to kind of quick start using jobs, which could be the Kata containers. Are there other thoughts on community bug bash in the sense of, where would people, do we want people to contribute to the ideas of what we should be bug bashing, or also be able to do it? And if they are able to execute some of the scenarios, should that feedback go in a HackMD, or where could that go?
That's an interesting question. I think definitely having our scenarios in HackMD is a good idea. In terms of having ideas for what to bug bash. Like for sure, I think we should have our a couple basic scenarios that are just preset to get people started. And then after that,
yeah, that makes sense to have everyone run through kind of the basic debug echo one. And then if you want, you can move up to others. Maybe an issue, a GitHub issue would be good for that too. Because we can just have the scenarios in the description there and continue to edit the description. Then people can kind of comment, you know, how it works out for them.
Mhm. I think if there's other scenarios people test, they can open a new issue.
Yeah, or even comment in that issue, like just tested this one.
Yeah, exactly.
I'd be curious if other projects do this.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Have any of y'all heard of anyone doing this? I think we have like our unit tests and such for testing things and end-to-end tests. But I don't know if other projects do kind of they rely on their integration tests for more of a bug bash, or if they have more of a community hands-on.
Yeah, I mean, the only time I've ever seen like bug bashes happen is like at KubeCons.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of like more ongoing process, I haven't seen anything like that. But I'm sure there are projects that do this.
Yeah, it might be interesting to look into. Well, maybe that's something that we put out there on the Slack too. So it's like 2 questions. It's one is, hey, we have jobs in Ocry's dev branch. Curious what people are excited about using that for various protocols. Like what kind of management could you do with co-op based devices or zero comp based devices versus OnVIF versus OKCUA? And then the follow-up question is, would people be interested in a bug bash of sorts where we can test out some scenarios with this and doing that through an issue type format? And if there is response and interest, we can do that. Otherwise, we can kind of test the scenarios we can. And then the bug bash is essentially over time. Like as people discover issues, they discover issues. We are still pre-release, so that kind of makes sense as well. Any thoughts for or against that flow?
I I think it makes sense and straightforward, so I'm for
Cool.
it.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds good. Then I will put a message out into Slack about that with those like 2 questions. And I think that's all of my questions around kind of what a bug bash looks like in our context. If we want to move on to whatever's next, I don't know if there is anything next, and if we just want to go ahead and go to triage.
Yep, I think that's all for the agenda items. So I guess we can go to triage. And also as a note, this is totally as a side, I'm getting my wisdom teeth removed, so I have to leave a little bit early. So I'm gonna pass on the moderating task to you, Kate, if that's okay.
Okay, cool. Sounds good. Good luck with that.
Thanks.
Awesome. Well, Brian, I think you're on issue triage. Are you able to share your screen?
Well, I think as luck would have it, there are no issues in need of triage, so
Oh, cool.
I'm not sure I need to. When I look at the project roadmap, there are no triage needed issues.
Cool. Is there anything we should check up with regards to like investigating, anything to look through? We have our workflow that's essentially closing issues, and I think we actually had a few closed today. If we wanted to look through those, but yeah, I think we're at a good point with that. Yeah, if you don't see anything that really needs discussion on the project management side of things, we can skip that today.
Nothing stands out to me, unless you have something on your mind.
No, I think it's fine. Cool. Are there any other thoughts, topics that folks want to bring up?
Nothing on top of my head. Any updates on when we're gonna have our next release date?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think we should have it soon. So in that release, let's look at the changelog and see what would be there.
Are we waiting for like our jobs change?
Yeah, I think that's a good one to get in. Also, there was a bug where you couldn't deploy multiple configurations. I think that's been in since the last release, and so that would also be a good fix to have in. So a bug where you couldn't deploy multiple configurations that use the same discovery handler. So that would be beneficial to get in. Let me double check that that's not already in a last release. Yeah, I think that would also come in with this release. So maybe that's a good point, Roa. Maybe we should set some timeline. So maybe we spend the next week or next week exploring bug bash. So if that ends up becoming something that people are actively engaging in, that can even continue beyond the time period of a release, it feels like to me. So say we have an issue with the bug bash of jobs going, or maybe that even evolves into just like a use case scenario of jobs. We can still create a release, and that just becomes a good source of knowing what needs to be patched and improved for the next release.
Sounds great.
Cool. So yeah, let's set the like mid-February next release. Hope for that. And it would also be good to get a in our demo section of our documentation something out for jobs. And we could potentially do, if I figure out my setup with this IP camera demo, we could potentially do that. But I think the barrier to setting that up would be a little higher because there's a lot of components to it. So we may want to think about what a good easy to do job scenario could be, because I think that's some of the feedback we've gotten with our demos is that they're a little long-winded at times. So start brainstorming some ideas with that. I'm wondering with IP cameras if we could do more of a general management scenario. One that I'm thinking is, actually, I think this might work. Usually with a lot of cameras, you can change its name. That management endpoint of like change device name is usually available on most cameras, or at least the ones I've tried, I think it is. So we could do something like that, where all the broker does is gives it a different name. And that kind of just shows that, but it would be hard for people who don't have IP cameras. So another good option would be something in the like in UDEV that happens to be on most Linux systems. And some kind of management there. Yeah, or if you all have any ideas on that, that would be great for some type of jobs scenario. And we can just do more brainstorming on that, and maybe some people in Slack will comment on that as well. Great. Any last thoughts, updates? Cool. I think we can end 15 minutes early, and then as always, this will be posted to our YouTube channel soon. And if it's not, or I guess you won't see this if it's not, but we'll get it up there soon. And also our past recordings are up there too. And we are once the first Tuesday of every month. So we'll be back in a month. Awesome.
Next month.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.